Today I'll be redrawing Cheneviv, their artwork. Greetings, welcome to the Witching Hour. Firstly, congrats to Cheneviv for reaching 100k. Obviously, I have not even close, so I applaud them for this achievement that I'm pretty sure I'll never reach. Existential dread aside, for this piece I did a traditional sketch just on paper to get the anatomy out of the way, and then I started sketching details out on top. I started with the bust of the character because that's as far as the original shows us, and then I had to improvise, which I'm not the best at. I had an idea for a story to go with this piece, but it probably doesn't make sense, and obviously since this is someone else's character, it's probably going to be really wrong comparatively to what they might have thought. But it helped me make the illustration more cohesive and detailed, so thank you to my random daydreams. At this point, I was just getting a general idea of what I wanted the final to look like, so everything's very rough and messy and not the best, but it's alright. I don't know, I feel like the first sketch is usually one of my favorite parts of the drawing, but this time it just didn't click for some reason. And this is where I started doing my second sketch layer, putting in details and the like. I did this kind of on autopilot, which would explain why it just looks very sad. It's really, really sad. However, I did kind of learn from this. What I learned was that you shouldn't draw whilst also doing homework and watching Netflix. Oh, that sounds really bad. Am I the only one that needs to just compulsively multitask all the time and for no reason whatsoever? I don't have to. It's not like I have anything to finish right away. It's just that I do it for no purpose. And I'm not sure if it makes my work worse because I've never worked without multitasking. Anyway, the jacket in the original reminded me of a jacket I saw in a show once, so I tried to copy that one in my first sketch, but it didn't end up liking the loose sleeves, so I made the sleeves more fitted, which is probably the right decision for the aesthetic that this piece is going for, which is kind of dystopian, post-apocalyptic, which is a really cool aesthetic actually. I want to try doing more of that. Oh, and I just realised that I didn't flip the canvas for any of this. Everything's probably really wonky. This is where I start making a palette to use. I think it's really useful to do as it makes the entire piece more cohesive from the very beginning. I also tried another method for the base colours in this. Usually I select an entire area, which takes a lot of time, so this time I just kind of did it messily and fixed it as I went along. I'm not sure if this is actually much faster than the other way, but it felt quicker, so I'll take a placebo effect for the time being. I guess this method would be problematic if I wanted to change a colour for whatever reason. Thankfully I didn't have to this time, but I wonder how much I would want to defenestrate myself if I had to change colours repeatedly. If you're wondering about the little striped pattern I'm putting in a couple of places, I kind of wanted something that leaned into the post-apocalyptic theme, and I decided that I could subtly hint at the character as part of some sort of organization. I don't know, maybe it doesn't work out, but I thought it was cool. For the rest of the outfit, I went very minimalist, literally just a black jumpsuit thing with white gloves and green accents. Now that I look at it, the contrast is a bit lacking, but I think it's okay considering the vibe we're trying to go for. Or maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better, who knows. This is where I begin shading the hair, something that I did differently since I usually start with skin. I also used a different method for the hair where instead of using shapes to begin with, I draw hair strands. But later on I kind of use my normal method as well and then merge them, so I guess that's a bit more unique. So far I focused a lot on the hair, giving it some general shading, but this is where I started adding detail to the eyebrows and lashes. Although it was a bit difficult since the face is relatively small in the piece and I wanted to try and make them look different. Probably didn't work out, but it's there. This is where I start the eyes, doing them differently to usual, which probably isn't the best for a draw this in your style challenge, is it? Oh well. The eyes I've been drawing recently have been very simple, usually just the iris pupil and highlight, But for this I went a bit more realistic, added a few more details. This is where I start the skin, beginning with the saturated colour to add some life, and then I added less saturated colour for the shadows. And I'm just kind of blending everything out, making it look nice, but like, I have a problem with like overblending, I think, and I really want to try and like tackle it, but I don't know how to do that exactly. Like, how would you stop overblending? And finally I added a highlight to prevent the skin from becoming like too saturated, like overly so to the point where she looked like an orange. This is where I started adding more of my usual method when it comes to hair, starting with the general idea of tone and going from there. I think it makes the hair like look like it has more volume, while the first method gives it flow, so mixing them together would give us both, right? I used the gradient method for the hat just for time's sake. It also works quite well on things like hats, since they usually have a greater range of values. Then I used a fill layer to make something like kind of like woven material to add texture. Then I added some highlights and just kind of blended it all to make it look nice. Now it's time for the mask. Remember to wear one if you go out if you can. I just went into PSA mode there, sorry. I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm drawing materials anyway, so let's pretend that it's actually good and doesn't look like it was done by a visually impaired frog. Strangely, the pipe wasn't all that challenging, which is probably because I did something wrong. I'm not sure what exactly it was, but it's far too easy for me to trust. I think it might just be that, like, I'm guessing a real, like, metal pipe would have corrugations, and I just didn't go that far into it. I kind of just did some basic, like, highlight, shadow, and done, which probably isn't the best thing to do. I shouldn't, like, only do things by halves, but here I am doing exactly that. And this is where I start the belt. Okay, I got slightly lazy, so I just did some basic lighting and used the gradient method for the most part. Also, why am I compelled to add pockets to every belt I draw? It's not even a common thing with belts, but I do it almost every time I draw one. I've also started doing the shading on the jumpsuit. I started out with some basic volume and then added more detail to try and make it look nicer. However, I don't exactly love the result, and I think it's just like the fact that I've overblended and then that's just putting me off. And it might also be just because at this point I had been working on the piece for quite a while without stepping back, so it probably looks worse. And I admit that I got really lazy with the lighting, probably because at this point I just had been working for around 2.5 hours. So I basically just did the worst job I could do. Okay, I take it all back. This hand isn't half bad, considering the mess I made of everything else. Maybe that's the secret to drawing good hands, being absolutely done with the drawing you're making, so that with only the hand is okay, and the rest of it looks terrible. Okay, I didn't have a reference for the shoes, so they might look a bit wonky. Actually, wait. I don't think I referenced anything for this piece. That explains a lot. Learn from this everyone, use references or else. Also, you can see how much I'm making things up and I love it. Like, the shoelaces don't look like they could be tied up even on the inside at all. What was I trying to do? Ah yes, more lazy shading. Delightful. Absolutely delightful. I feel like I'm really mean for roasting my past self, but it is me, so I can do it, right? Like, I feel like I'm being really mean to myself. Anyway, I don't really mind the bag. It's largely in the background, and I just gave it a bit of shading and texture, so it's not terrible. It could be better, but also a whole lot worse, so it's fine. This is where I started experimenting with kind of like the fill layers, I guess, because before it was like lines and then changed them to look more like woven. But I think this actually works, you know? Here's where I do some color grading so everything looks like a little bit better, and I didn't do that much, but I think it just really changed like the look of the piece and made everything look a lot more cohesive, like it was meant to be that way. And here's the useless background. The reason I'm calling it that is because it looked terrible and I had to scrap it, but you can watch me suffer with it. It's really bad and I don't know what I was thinking. Actually, no, I do. I thought that the piece could look good with a rundown wall in the background. Again, dystopian and post-apocalyptic, you know? And honestly, I still think that idea could work. Like, I don't mind the idea. However, like, I think it was just like I was foiled by my own stupidity because I didn't use a reference. Don't be like me, use references. Enjoy watching me try and fail to make anything important. Finally, after failing to make anything substantial for around 20 minutes, I decided to change gears and making a different background that I think gives the piece a very different feel, but it still works with everything I said before. Like, it kind of still feels dystopian, but just a bit more like sad. Happy accidents, right? Happy accidents. Here is the final piece, which you can see on my Instagram, linked below. Thank you for watching, don't forget to like, subscribe, all of that fun YouTube stuff, and I'll see you next time at the Witching Hour.